Hey everyone, this is Rushlock, and today I'm joined by Chelebelle. We're going to talk about the X-Men Gold series. Um, so I do have X-Men Prime in front of me as well, Shel. Um, and you've been with the series since the start, right?
Yes.
Did you? So out of all the Resurrection titles, what made Gold, I guess, stand out to you?
When they were originally announcing the teams and the writers, even was kind of what influenced who I was going to pick up. And while the writer on Gold wasn't someone that was super exciting to me, it was the one that had Rachel, who I really enjoy, as well as Colossus. It
Right.
also had Kitty Pryde, who I have never ever been a fan of, but I've found that I do actually kind of enjoy her in Gold. Definitely more than I've liked her in anything
Any
else.
other projects? Yeah. So Gold stood out to me for being kind of like the return on ramp for maybe like '90s fans. I just grew up in that era from the Claremont transition into the second X-Men series and going forward. Um, this has been the first comic book series I've picked up in probably close to 10 years. Um, Start with Prime, so Prime kind of launches Blue, Gold, and Weapon X to some degree, and then they go on to X Men Gold, and basically this picks up, as far as I'm aware. I think you're a little more familiar with the recent stories than I am beyond this point. Um, X Men versus Inhumans wraps up, and then transitions into Resurrection, if I'm not mistaken. Is that
Correct.
accurate?
My
So,
head.
I remember Gold opens up with their new antagonist, Nance. I can't remember her full name, but there's a lady named Nance, and she's kind of like this generation Striker, maybe. Like we don't really know what her full motivations are yet.
Yeah, they seem like to be the new version of Friends of Humanity.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good comparison as well. But yeah, Kitty runs into Colossus, Rachel, Nightcrawler, who she served on Excalibur with, um, Old Man Logan, who's kind of like just for whatever reason replaced the 616 Wolverine entirely.
Yeah,
Um,
he's instead of you having 616 Logan and everything, now you have Old Man Logan in literally
exactly.
everything.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It was like now he's in gold. He's in astonishing. I'm sure he's going to pop up in other things. Um, we have Storm, of course, and one of Kitty's caveats for coming back and taking over leadership was she wanted Storm to stay. Um, they've always had a close relationship over the years, since the '80s even between the two of them. So it seems like all these characters, minus maybe Old Man Logan, um, at least this version of him, have had direct, strong ties to this Kitty Pryde over the years. Um,
And he still is, a Logan, so you've at least
right,
got that connection. And same thing with Rachel isn't Jean, but it's another
right.
kind of same line.
Let's see. So somewhere between Prime and Gold, they move the X Mansion to Central Park and just park it like a mobile home. Just
Right there in the middle, like a not so tiny home.
hmm And someone from the city shows up and wants to basically build them, right? And just say, you know,
Trying to charge them rent, I think it was, or property taxes.
yeah, like, well, you've parked it on the most prime real estate in New York City, so it doesn't come out without a cost. So here you are. You'd mentioned Rachel being in this title, one of the characters you're looking forward to. So they've given her this code name and costume change to Prestige. Um,
And
Character development wise,
they
go ahead.
explain later a little more on the, I guess it's issue one, where they talk about the code name change.
Right.
And at first, like, the name Prestige to me seemed really weird, but I guess I wasn't. I'm thinking of it in part like from an aspect of the Marvel Heroes game with the Prestige system,
True.
or I guess even the movie. But when I actually I looked up what the word means, and it's um, a power to influence or impress, as well as high status. And I'm assuming that they were going more for the first definition.
Right. Um, so Kitty does something in issue one that stood out to me. She phases an entire building. Have her powers scaled over the years that I'm just not aware of, or was that meant to
That
be a big showcase of?
that I don't know, because that did seem pretty impressive. Like phasing jets, we've seen her do before. That's not really necessarily a big new thing, but that was a literal whole building. So
Yeah,
I don't
because
know
over
if
the
she
years, the
got
more mass she would try
more
to phase, it was
powerful.
just impractical or whatever. Like she had like
Yeah,
limitations on her powers.
And so I'm not sure if she has. Again, I'm not a Kitty Pryde fan, so I don't actually normally read a whole lot that she's in. Most of the titles I've read, she was only passingly in.
Right. And so
So
the fight for the first issue is the Brotherhood, or the New Brotherhood, or a form of the Brotherhood, or whoever these folks are.
yeah, the people calling themselves the New Brotherhood of Evil
Of
Mutants.
evil mutants, right? There's this like they have this big reveal at the end. They fight for a little bit, and it kind of also leads into issue 2, where so we've got Pyro, Avalanche, Magma from the old New Mutants, which she hasn't really been a Brotherhood member before that I'm aware of. Mask, and then Mesmero, and then random alien guy.
Yeah, random alien guy that nobody knows
Right,
who
yeah.
he is or where he came from.
So they fight, they battle. Old Man Logan gets taken by this group. He gets all trussed up and tied to a chair and interrogated by Mesmero, I believe, which I was looking back through my old 94 Fleer set of cards. I was like, I've heard this character's name before, but I never heard anything with him. And that's because in the 94 card series, he's deceased already. So apparently he's like I guess an older style X-Men villain that I just don't have any recollection of. But,
yeah, he wasn't one I remembered either. So
but I'm guessing he's some kind of low to mid range telepath or mental prowess powers, and I assumed he was like more hypnotic or illusionist, but I guess he has some kind of telepathic ability because they attribute Magma working with this group to his manipulation. So
right, as a mind control kind of thing.
right. They kind of so there was one scene that stood out to me where after this fight, Shield gets involved, like ever so lightly. Like it was almost like they wanted some kind of thread or tether to the rest of the universe going on right now.
We went, hey, this is going on. Let's have Cap show up.
Yeah. I don't know if Cap is because I don't know what's going on in the Avengers and Captain America titles, these days, but Cap was like kind of like the I guess the front face for Shield at the moment. Maybe as a wrap. Well, the Secret Empire hasn't happened yet, so maybe this was kind of like a breadcrumb leading in that direction. The whole Secret Empire stuff.
Yeah, I'm assuming because he was in his Hydra Cap uniform, if I'm remembering correctly.
And so I think it was their way of having the rest of the universe kind of acknowledge Kitty as the new leader, like she's the new front face too of the X-Men. So there's kind of a briefing between the two of them of like, well, we're gonna take him all into custody. Like, hey, we want to keep this random alien guy. Why? Well, he's a random alien guy. We like to talk to. The rest of the ones you're taking, we already know everything about them. But this guy, it didn't really seem to make a lot of sense to me, like why they randomly wanted to keep that one. But they did.
Yeah,
Shield was okay with it. So
of all of them, especially knowing what they did about them, being mind controlled,
right,
and not under their own.
Well, I guess they end up keeping Magma as well because they just write it off as mind control and they didn't turn it over to Shield or anything. Oh, so this guy, Mesmero's had Logan all trussed up and trying to interrogate him or whatever and get in his head, and he makes some comments about how tied up Logan is, and he's like, "Hey, buddy, these chains are made out of adamantium. The chains they have Logan tied to, but the chair's just made of wood." So he breaks the chair and does the old Wolverine thing and goes to town, and he ends up
rookie mistake.
Right? that's why you're a B-lister, supervillain is you forgot part of your restraints at a weak point. But so he takes down who he can, and then he calls in the X-Men to come pick him up and pick up the bad guys. That's how I guess they got them all trussed up in the first place. But when the X-Men arrive, it's like not exactly open and shut. Like they show up on scene, and I guess they've kind of reestablished control over Logan, or at least they're battling him in real time while the X-Men are attacking. So some of them peel off and try to deal with that threat, and Mesmero's back online, and I think this is the issue. I don't really like this one now. I think it was issue 3 where Rachel finds Mesmero and just. It's funny when telepaths fight, right? Because they're standing 2 feet apart. Because
they're just standing there having a staring contest. Right. Yeah, this is the issue she finds him in. I also thought it was interesting, or at least I thought it showed kind of a nice tactical side for Kitty being the leader when the New Mutant style kids want to come along, and she picks out the ones that she's not going to have to actually worry
Yep.
about.
Yeah, that was my first note actually for issue 3 was because they're going out without Logan. They're going to rescue Logan, so whatever they're doing must be pretty hard task. And all the current Gen Xers or the newest newest batch of new X-Men show up like, hey, we want to go with you, and you're short-handed. And Kitty takes rock slide and armor. And admittedly, I'm not overly familiar with either character. Like they show up in the stuff I've been reading on Marvel Unlimited probably the last 2 years, just here and there. But I'm not like, in my mind or my perspective, having been on comics for a long time, I don't recognize them as X-Men. But they've actually been established, I guess, for a number of years now. So after Rockslide and Armor join, there's like a lot of different break-off fights. One was the Rachel Mesmero, the telepath thing where they stare each other down, and I like the multitasking. Like Mesmero's not doing anything else other than fighting, but Rachel's like locking him down and winning, and talking. Like it's almost like call waiting, Like,
she is clearly much more talented than he is at the whole telepath thing.
There's almost an element of like hacking or cyber warfare to the idea of telepathic fights.
Just exactly. That's kind of how it reads. So you have all the different fights in issue 3, and then the rescuing of the characters that they hadn't rescued yet.
Right.
And the only thing that really stood out to me in this issue is the Heck guys, is they're all worried about Kitty getting blown up, and I'm like, she just phased a whole building in one of the last issues. You don't think she can handle being intangible for 15 seconds while the building stops blowing up?
Yeah, because they did have very dramatic, like, she's like, all right, you guys go back to the plane, go, we'll catch up. But like, it was obvious from the timer and stuff, like there was no opportunity to catch up. But like, what was going to happen? We had to remember, like, was Kitty just going to phase the bomb and the bomb was shut down, or like you said, it was obvious she could just grab Magma and hold her breath for a few seconds and be fine.
Yeah, but I guess had to build some drama.
Right, and it's like, well, I guess from this perspective, you could also see this as an onboarding for new readers, and newer readers wouldn't even know that was a thing.
They wouldn't know she could do that. I mean, they knew she could phase a skyscraper, but I guess this could be different.
Not apply it, yeah. They wouldn't be aware of all the different applications of her power set, because phasing has never been the flashiest, power on pages.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a much more subtle thing to display than some of the other ones. And then let's see, issue 3. Then they go confront. What is her name?
Nance?
Miss Nance.
Yeah.
I don't.
That's why I put as well. I put Miss Nance because that's what the I think the bubble said in the last page.
I'm assuming they've got to say her whole name somewhere. I thought that in the discussion with Cap that he told them. But
yeah, it was that or issue 1 with the opening. I can't because like she's being interviewed by a news network or something. And
yes.
And I think I meant to go back to grab it and I never did. And so now she's in my notes as Miss Nance.
She's the evil bigot lady. That's right. Who she is.
So X-Men Gold, Gambit's on the cover. Gambit makes an appearance. He is coming back from a job. He's been stealing something. We don't know what yet at that moment. And it flashes over to the X-Men who are fighting the Serpent Society, I guess.
Which was very random, but I suppose that's their way of showing that, they're out being do-gooders in New York as a whole and not just fighting maybe X-Men fights.
So then goes into Old Man Logan and Storm go visit the morgue. Presumably this is an executioner, or whoever this character is. I refer to him as an executioner, but one of his victims. And Storm did something I thought was interesting. She whips out the XSE badge when the guy asks, like, he's not like giving them the 3rd degree. And from the way I read it, he was kind of like just like trying to like cover his own ass, like
is this really even any good anymore?
Right? Yeah, that was the question. He was like, oh, a marshal's badge, is that? Okay, that's fine. If someone asks, I'm just say a marshal stopped by. Like he just wanted to cover a story for someone came around asking questions after they did. Then we get back into Gambit, and apparently he's pulled a job for a character named Olivia Trask, which any longtime fan would know. Trasks are the creators of the Sentinels.
The Trask name makes you go dun dun dun.
Right? Yeah. And it's Gambit, so you're never quite sure where his motivations lie in terms of, is he just doing this to get paid, or is that an ulterior motive? And of course, in this, he's taking the job because he wanted to find out who wanted this item and why. And so he's
what it was.
Yeah, he wanted to find out what he was stealing, because he was just told, object A is located at destination B, just go make it happen, and brought it back. And because even at the time when he was bringing it back, he didn't know who the buyer was or who the person.
Right, not until he's he got there.
And through some kind of Gambit oops moment, there's a fumble, and the vial, gets dropped and hits the ground and shatters, and these nanites get loose. And nanites plus sentinels is always going to equal a bad time. So
That goes about how you think it's going to go.
right, yeah. Just use your imagination, and your worst case scenario. That's about how it went. So this new form of sentinels being created, and so Gambit dials in the X-Men. And I think it switches back to the X Mansion where someone's trying to interrogate that alien dude, but they don't have either their translator system isn't working because it's a language that isn't known to their database, and he's just chilling in this box and staring at them. They're staring at him, and they don't seem really sure what to do with him.
Let's see. They figure out that he's not a mutant. I think up until that point they thought he was, or assumed he was.
And I think after that scene is when Gambit's psych call gets because Rachel interrupts, I think, and says, "Hey, Gambit's on the phone." Like, well, I'm kind of busy. Oh, because Kitty was talking to somebody. Who was she talking to at the moment?
Let's see. They were talking to. Oh, they were doing Danger Room.
That's
scenario.
right.
She's talking to Amara. Amara is saying she doesn't remember anything except for Mesmero in her head, so she doesn't know anything else that went on or why they were having them do it. And then they end up, Rachel silinks them in with Gambit, which is kind of a neat little scene where they're in, I don't know if that's supposed to be Madripoor or just somewhere tropical looking.
I was getting the idea of like Mardi Gras because it was Gambit.
Oh yeah, they've got beads on, so that makes sense. Mardi Gras for Gambit. There you go. But and then we find at the end of that issue, we get to see the super nanite sentinels.
Right, so the vial that Gambit drops and shatters, and it jumps into the nearby computer, and Trask freaks out, which is never a good sign. She's not happy with the situation now, and nothing happens immediately, so Gambit's like, what's the big deal? And she explains what the big deal is, and, I guess we better do something about this.
So now we have learning sentinels, which never goes well for the X-Men, really, historically.
Right.
So they've got this new one, and so then the next issue has them, well, they have to come save Gambit first. But then trying to rescue everybody in the building, even Olivia Trask.
So I'm guessing something's happened with Gambit over the last 5 to 8 years where, because there was a scene between he and Storm where Gambit makes a comment about saying like, I'm glad you and your friends showed up to help, and Storm has to remind Gambit like, these are your friends too. Like, I'm thinking Gambit's been on the outside for a long time. So we get to issue 5 and we finally get our fastball special.
Yes. Just not with the normal suspects.
Composition. So Colossus
and we
fastballs.
Also find, he fastballs
Kitty into a Sentinel, I presume.
Yes, and then there's, a kind of funny double entendre moment there that kind of made me chuckle.
Because up to this point, they've been having kind of semi-awkward, not terrible, but semi-awkward interactions between Kitty and Peter. Like, for anyone long-term readers, they had a previous relationship, and that was easily 15 years ago type of thing. But
yeah, and now they're not in one anymore, but they're still having to be around each other. And
because I think even Peter moved into her room while she was gone from the mention. And like, I think he even says, like, well, mine was occupied, and she was like, was it really? He's like, no. Like, he can't maintain the lie. It's Colossus. Like, it just sounded better.
And then issue 5 also has us, I think that's where we find out that the Sentinels aren't just targeting like X-Men style mutants, but they're targeting anybody with any kind of mutation in their gene whatsoever, and that can be basically anything.
Right. There's like color blindness and like a certain hair loss type or something, and baldness. There we go.
Say heart defects are a mutation
Mutations,
as well.
Now the first or second Sentinel they down, it was Rachel, right? This is where they find out that because traditionally psionic powers don't work at all against Sentinels.
Right, they're trying everything on it, and they're finding out that Kitty tries to phase through it a second time, and then
that's when they learn they're subliminal
because it's a learning robot.
Right.
And so Rachel tries to use her telepathy on it, which works, but it knocks her totally out.
And that's where we find out these Sentinels are kind of like the Borg. Like it's like every
But
every
they
encounter, you
then
gotta come with something new.
reform and turn into a whole swarm of them because it was a swarm of nanites in the vial that Gambit broke
Right.
in the first place.
Let's see. You got the mutation part. Okay, yeah. So that was the last thing with the issue 5 for my notes.
Yeah, I literally had one thing written down for issue 5 because it wasn't.
That's how issue
terribly
6 was for
exciting.
me. Like we get to issue 6, and Rachel's comatose. And we get some internal dream sequences for her. For she's talking to Jean, or mental state form of Jean, and her mother and her father and Scott, and I guess having some.
And Franklin.
Yeah, Frank, that's right. I had completely forgotten until a Discord conversation a couple weeks ago about the whole Days of Future Past, and that was where Rachel came from, and she was involved with Franklin at the time. Franklin Richards, for those who have no idea what we're talking about, which is Sue and Reed's son from the Fantastic Four. But I'd forgotten that was entirely a thing.
And you also get in this issue where it makes it, you have the fight sequences or the little panels. Like there's one page that I think is pretty neat setup wise where there's just a single speech bubble and it's somebody asking, I think, Nightcrawler's asking Kitty what the situation is in the fight, and the response is just lousy in this little tiny speech bubble. And you've got this whole page that's got not just X-Men fighting these Sentinels in the swarm, but you've got like Daredevil and Deadpool and Rogue. Those two are mutants at least, but as is Squirrel Girl. But it shows that this is a whole citywide problem, and
Right.
that everybody's having to come in and deal with these Sentinel swarm.
The nano sentinels are adaptive, but they seem to not be able to adapt to psionic attacks because the Cuckoos
Right.
get together and knock them down in issue
And
6, and then Rachel wakes
Probably
up.
are knocked out as well.
Yeah, they're KO'd immediately, but then Rachel snaps out of it and comes back to the field.
She's feeling all of her teammates struggling and dying, and so without her, she's gonna have to overcome her fear of what she turns into in the future, and so it makes it seem like she's got some kind of self-imposed mental block, maybe, that keeping herself from being as powerful as she could be. And so she snaps out of it and goes all badass and takes over all the Sentinels. And so basically across the whole city, they just go psh, 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 all up in smoke, which is pretty impressive. And that again kind of gives you a scale of, same with Kitty and the skyscraper. Like that's a much bigger scale than I imagine. You always know Rachel is powerful, but it's kind of a demonstration of exactly how powerful in that situation she is. Yeah. And then the fallout of the fight, it had a lot of stuff going on that I didn't understand what was happening or why it was going on. I'm assuming we find out in the next arc, but you have Colossus, who seems to be depowered.
Right. At the end of the fight with the nano sentinels, like something has happened, because in a panel he's kind of getting dematerialized. It looked like, and then when Rachel swats the problem, then he's back in human form, but his metal is nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, and then you've got them asking Rachel if she's okay, and there's that shot of her with all these other people in her eyes. Like, I was trying to pick out who they all were. Like, I recognized a lot of the Young Avengers, like Novar and Spider-Man, and it looks like Ronan, the Accuser, maybe. But I don't know if that's supposed to signify something that's coming, or if by maybe sending her telepathy out that far now, maybe she's got everybody in her head.
I didn't think about it that way. That's a good point. I interpreted that as she was seeing all the heroes in New York that were involved in the battle, but I did the same thing where I kind of glanced at it and I'm like, I really can't tell who these people are, so I didn't try too hard.
Yeah, it mostly only caught my eye because I'm like, oh, hey, there's Novar.
No, you're right, because there were definitely people in her, like, I looked at it, but I wasn't recognizing people, so I stopped trying to figure out who they were, because I didn't recognize them. But if you picked out a few of them as being cosmic entities, then that makes sense that something could be coming.
Yes. And I was going to say, and then the next page, I had my little fangirl moment because there's Molly Hayes from Runaways.
Right.
doing her cleanup. And then you have her cleanup, and then the last little panel is that lone sentinel that's apparently left. And that made me go, how the heck did she miss one?
Well, that was the only
Really?
thing that confused me was with the psi powers was that they were supposed to be adaptive, but like, is it just because it's psionic based? But that was the one power they couldn't adapt to,
And
or
maybe there wasn't any way to technologically do that. And I
right,
was going, it would make sense to me that maybe she would have missed one if she was physically there during the fight. But I had the impression she was still in the Institute back in Central Park and that she wiped these things out all over the city from where she was. And in the case that that means she's just, blanket telepathing the whole city, then I find it kind of hard to believe she would have missed one.
right.
But she apparently did.
Um, maybe overall opinions like 1 through 6. Did it meet, fall short, or exceed expectations? You've already spoke positively about the art, so
It for me, it exceeded. I think it could have been better, but I am enjoying where it's starting off from so far. I've said, I'm never shy about pointing out that I don't like Kitty Pryde, but I've enjoyed her in this book so far. I feel like she's shaping up to be a good leader without doing. My main problem with her previously is she's usually just so self-righteous and kind of, I don't know what the word I want is.
is it like the soapbox approach, or
Yeah, kind of. And she's usually so preachy to her teammates when, the other X-Men especially, I'm like, if you're going to be preachy to anybody, pick somebody else. But it's like they're struggling right along with you. But I thought that this series did a good job so far of setting her up into a position of somebody, that maybe doesn't want to be the leader but is really trying. I think she has a really excellent speech in, I think it's issue 1, where she's addressing just civilians who are looking at them like, oh, you're mutants, gross, go away, we hate you.
right? Yeah, because there was a woman and her child there, and um, I think the mother was telling the child not to talk to it. And she was like, "Really?
Yeah.
Really?"
Yeah, it's like that's what you're gonna call me. But I thought that that was a good speech, and it wasn't just them preaching about how, oh, you people are awful because you're looking down at us, but also doing a little, well, hey, we kind of deserve that right now.